Stephanie Dobson is back with us this week. Stephanie is a lawyer and mediator at Hanka Divorce Law and Mediation here in Lloydminster. And today, Stephanie, we are talking about something called shared parenting. So let's start by talking about what exactly that means.
Sure. So in essence, shared parenting is a certain allocation of parenting time between two parents. So it's where each parent has at least 40% of the time with the children in a calendar year. So it used to be called shared custody, which might be a more familiar term to our viewers, prior to the change in the divorce and parenting legislation in March of 2021. So given that this shared parenting is calculated on an annual basis, parents can literally get down to the number of minutes that they spend and hours that they spend with their children. Now, lots of people don't get into that much detail, but if you need to know, there happens to be 525,600 minutes in a 365-day calendar year, if anyone needs to know that random piece of information. But when creating a parenting schedule, the legislation doesn't actually create any kind of a presumption in favor of this 60-40, 50-50 type of arrangement. Instead, the Divorce Act and the legislation looks at the relationship between the parent-child and trying to figure out what's in the best interest of the children.
Would this have any impact on child support, Stephanie?
Well, our viewers might remember that child support is determined based on the child support guidelines. And so that's either provincial or federal regulations. So when we look to calculate child support under shared parenting, there's actually a special section for this. It's called Section 9 of the guidelines. So under that section, there's 3 points to consider. So first, we look at what's called a set-off approach. So that is where we calculate what mom would pay to dad if the kids were with dad primarily, and what dad would pay to mom if the kids were with mom primarily. So if dad would pay $500 and mom would pay $300, that offset amount, the difference, is $200. So the set-off approach is always the first calculations that we look at. And then the next parts of the guidelines are what I call the flexibility provisions. So next we would look at any increased costs of shared parenting arrangements. The parents might have to get bigger homes to accommodate more of a full-time basis with the kids. And next we look at the conditions, means, and needs of either spouse or of the children for whom child support is sought.
So are there any implications tax-wise for shared parenting?
Well, the simple answer is yes. The tax rules are under a completely different set of rules than the family and divorce laws, but yes, there are. So there's two aspects that I thought we could cover today. One is the Canada Child Benefit, CCB, and the other is the amount for eligible dependent, or otherwise known as the AED credit. So first, let's look at the CCB rules. So under the Income Tax Act, one key of the keys to shared custody is that children are residing with each parent on an equal or near equal basis, is what they say. So there's no percentage that's particularly specified in there. So if you are living in that kind of an arrangement and you qualify under the tax rules, then each parent is eligible to receive 50% of their CCB entitlement. So next, let's look at the AED credit. So this is a credit that you can claim on your taxes if you have an eligible dependent. So what the heck is an eligible dependent? Well, first, you need to be either unmarried or separated. And second, you need to maintain what's called a self-contained domestic establishment where you support a dependent. So if you have one child, then you and your former spouse are going to have to figure out who's going to claim that child in a particular year. If you have more than one child, each of you can claim one child on your taxes. So I just want to mention two very quick notes of caution on this. First, if you're doing a set-off approach, which is that 500 minus 200 equals 500 minus 300 equals $200, that set-off approach, you need in your documentation to document the full amount, not just the $200 as that difference between the two numbers. And then secondly, you have to make sure that you disclose to Canada Revenue Agency that you're doing a shared parenting arrangement. I've seen all too often where there's a huge tax bill if you misdeclared your parenting arrangement to the CRA.
So if people are going with the shared parenting plan, Stephanie, what tips would you have for them?
Well, I've got 3 really quick tips. In when you're working in shared parenting, a high degree of cooperation is really helpful. So my first tip for parents is to learn effective communication. There's so many different ways that you can do this, either with apps or with guidelines for communication in your parenting plan that I always help parents to develop. Second is to develop consistency between homes so that the kids know what the rules are in each home, and how they act can be very similar, and their routines are very similar, can really help them. And third is to take steps to reduce the conflict between parents. This is one of the leading factors in how the kids will adjust and how resilient they will be to the divorce is the degree of conflict between the parents.
All right, Stephanie, well, thank you once again for joining us, and we'll chat with you again next week.
Thanks.